Hi everyone, my name is Kees Keizer. I'm an assistant professor in the field of influence and persuasion. And apart from that, I also work as a consultant in that field. For today's topic, we are going to look at advertisement, packaging and commercials. And more specifically, we're going to look at some elements that you can include that will influence how people perceive the product, whether they feel they need it, and how they interpret the value and the quality of the product, and in the end, whether they buy it. Now, this information is hugely handy if you want to become a millionaire, or maybe if you want to prevent from actually buying stuff. Now, the reason that we're doing this topic is because of this watch. I bought the watch a couple of years ago, and the watch is great. So, the watch, what it does is it tells me how many steps I take, but it doesn't stop there. It tells me how efficiently I move. It will tell me how much oxygen I think I'm using, something like that. And it tells me the altitude at which I am, which is all super informative and very handy if you're an assistant professor and you hardly move all day because you're working behind a computer and you're writing all day and reading and that kind of stuff. And you're living in the Netherlands, which is basically the flattest country in the whole world. So who needs altitude? Anyways, so why did I buy the watch? And I think it has something to do with the advertisement or commercial I saw just prior to buying it. And the advertisement was great. It showed this guy standing on a snowy peak mountain. And he had these deep lines in his face from the cold and the sun that hit upon him while he climbed that mountain all the way to the summit. His hair was messy and he really looked tired. But you could see he felt accomplished and successful. And these were all things that I kind of felt, probably wished I felt. So I have deep lines in my face and I have gray messy hair. I look really tired, right? It's because I sit all day behind a computer that is creating it and not climbing up snowy peaks. But there was a connection there. And there were other things in the ad, like it talked about this precision Swiss instrument. So I just want to look at some elements that are often included in advertisements, on packaging or in commercials that in the end influence how we perceive a certain brand or a product, and in the end whether we actually buy it. Are these all? No, not by a long shot. There are so many of these basically knobs that you can turn to influence the consumer. It is a very rich field when it comes to persuasion and influence. But just let's dive in. First up, attention. If you want to sell a product and you have a commercial or you have your product standing somewhere on a shelf, you want people to notice it. If they don't notice it, they will not buy it. So what drives attention? When it comes to advertisement, let's take, for example, newspapers and magazines first. What research seems to indicate is that the top spot is the left upper corner. Basically the place where you start to read. In that specific position, advertisements that are placed there will attract most attention. When it comes to, for example, where your product is located in supermarkets, it is always eye height and, somewhere there. These are the locations where the A brands are located and the stuff they really want to sell. Unless, of course, the product is aimed at children, then, it's their eye height, not yours. It's placed lower, so they will see it. And this comes from a parent with very young children. Another location that is quite favorite in shops is somewhere near the cashier, Why? Well, you will know the first time you have children that are standing there and whining and basically showing that you didn't really a good job at bringing them up. So the total embarrassment that you will feel as a parent is a very strong motivator just to cave in to whatever they want and say, okay, just put it on. Now, other aspects that will determine attention are, of course, the size. When it comes to the size of ads, the bigger the ad, the more attention it will, of course, draw. There are specifically the one-page ads that will generate a lot of attention in comparison to the more fractional ones. I always like the black and white stuff. I think it's kind of arty in a way, but when it comes to attention, I'm a bit alone in that. It is specifically rich colors with a lot of contrast that will draw attention in. And when it comes to commercials and that kind of thing, movement is also something that will trigger attention a lot. Now, the last one is the most interesting one, namely involvement. The more involved you are in a specific product, category, type, the more likely it is that you will pay attention to ads from that product, type, category. So let's assume that you're highly into flip-flops with flower designs. Chances are, if you then browse to a magazine and there is an ad in there of flip-flops with specifically a flowery design, you will notice them. Now, but the thing is that it's not only if you're involved in the product type that has an influence, it's also how involved you are in that specific magazine that can have an impact. Or if it is a commercial, how involved you are in the specific TV program that you're looking at that holds the commercial in itself. The more involved you are in the magazine or TV program, the more attention you will pay to the ads that are, or commercials that are included. Now, and that makes it super important for you as a manufacturer to actually place your ads and your commercials on locations where you know that your target audience is highly interested. So I pay attention to the advertisement or the commercial. However, for me to actually buy the product, there needs to be a certain point where I actually recognize that I need such a watch with an altitude measurement and that kind of thing. How does that work? Now, for this we can use the hierarchy of needs of Maslow. And Maslow talks about needs almost like a pyramid, where you have the base layers that are formed by our very basic physiological need, like you need oxygen, you need water, and you need food. If you don't have those, there's nothing else in your life that you would strive for. You need those. However, as soon as you have oxygen, food, and water, then that is met. It's not something you continue to strive for if you have it. Then you move up to things like you have safety needs, then you have social needs, like you want friendship and you want belonging and love and that kind of thing. And then we strive for personal needs like status, that is something that we want to respect, that kind of thing. And in the end, we strive for self-actualization. Now, and it is specifically these higher needs that are elements that you keep on striving for. You're never fulfilled in that domain. Or manufacturers in commercials try to link to these very high needs. Why? Because it is something they will know that people are striving for. It's so much better just to link a product to, if you use this, you will belong, people will love you. This is a way to get status, respect, and that kind of thing. Far better to market it like that than simply saying, if you eat this, you will not be hungry. Because a lot of people may not be hungry at that specific moment. So when it comes to my watch, it was probably the summit, the guy living up to his potential and success and status, and which is kind of sad that I strive for these things, but maybe it's a reality. So now I feel the need to actually buy a product. But the next step is, how do people evaluate the product on the basis of the advertisement? Now, of course, there is often information in there that actually tells you the weight of the watch, for example, or these kind of things. But what I'm specifically interested in at this point is consumer inferences. Now, the first one that is interesting to mention is the proximity principle. Now, this refers to the tendency to perceive objects or events that are close to one another as being related or as sharing attributes. Now, the proximity principle is, for example, often used in fragrance, which is basically nothing, just a feeling in a bottle, right? It is all built by the commercial that surrounds it, or the advertisement that surrounds it, which often entails a girl or a guy in a very short swimsuit thingy. For example, the guy standing there with a six-pack and looking over the ocean in which he just took a dive, and all basically saying this is a sexy, fresh fragrance. Now, because he looks sexy and fresh and that kind of thing, you will interpret the product as being sharing the similar characteristics. Now, imagine me standing next to that. That would basically be more like in the realms of old and boring, and adding that kind of character to the product in itself. Probably not the way you want to go for with your fragrance. Now, when it comes to my watch, it is the same. So we have this guy standing there on top of that mountain, and he looked rugged. He looked determined and strong and that kind of thing. That will also be placed on the product, where I will perceive the product as being a rugged watch and a top performer, that kind of thing. That is the proximity principle. Next up are inferences based on categories. And these categories can, for example, be the brand itself. If I take a brand like Volvo, which is a car manufacturer, that will probably bring to mind a certain characteristic. Well, maybe you're not a car buyer yet, and maybe you don't have children, because then you might not know. But Volvo, right, normally is safety. Every friend of mine that at the moment they got the child, they basically bought the Volvo just to show that they really cared about safety. That kind of thing. So this is a characteristic based on a brand, but it can also be true for example, a country. Think back about the watch, where it was presented as being a Swiss watch. Now, that is wise, because Swiss automatically has the association of being a very precise type of watch. It could also say something like designed in Italy, right? Italian products are often perceived at forehand as being something with a keen eye for design and taste. And so we make use of these inferences based on categories. Now, there is another process that we often use when it comes to interpreting a product on the basis of an advertisement of a commercial. We namely use the process of inter-attribute correlations. What? Let me explain. So this is you using, for example, the price of a product that's listed in the advertisement or in the commercial as an indicator of the quality of the product. Now, and this is a logical one, right? Because often the higher the price, the better the product. But we use this correlation as also at forehand as a determinant of what you kind of expect with regard to this product. High price, probably a better one. Now, but it does not only hold for the price of the product, but also the price, the assumed price of the advertisement. If it is a very glossy advertisement, probably in an expensive magazine, these indicators you use to determine at forehand, you think this must be a very good, classy, quality product, purely on the basis of the price of the advertisement. Another one would be, for example, including the lifelong guarantee. Purely having the guarantee logo in there, on the basis of that we assume that it is a very well-built product. Manufacturers know this and therefore they kind of include it. They also know that not many people use the guarantee thing and send their product back after 25 years of use. Lifetime guarantee is a pretty safe bet for you as a manufacturer. But we use that lifelong guarantee at forehand as what we expect of the product. Now, another one would be new. If you're a manufacturer and you see your sales dropping from a certain product, what do? You say, we do something new, a new package in there, a new ingredient, something new. We tend to think that if it is listed as new on the advertisement or on the packaging or something, that it's probably an improved version, a better one. New resembles, correlates with us of being better. So now we saw that these elements being present in an advertisement really influence how we perceive the product at forehand. They color our expectations. But do they also influence how we evaluate the product after we bought it? And yes, it does. Because there is something like an expectation bias where we tend to line up our evaluations with our expectations. There is a beautiful study that has been done by Lee et al. In which they looked at, you gotta love research. They looked at the tasting of beer. So what they did was the following. So in this study, participants had to taste regular beer and a beer that was presented as a special brew. Now, for some of them, they just did this blindly and had no other information being presented, and they just had to taste and indicate their preference. Now, for the others, they learned that the special ingredient in this special brew was actually vinegar. Now, that had an impact on whether they, to what extent they actually preferred the special brew. However, what they also manipulated was when these people that learned that there was vinegar included in the beer, when they learned this in the tasting process, whether this was presented before the tasting or after the tasting, but before the evaluation. When do you think it had the most impact? It was before tasting. When they learned it prior to tasting, then it actually influenced how they evaluated the beer and how much they preferred it in the end. What does this tell us? It tells us that these expectations that we have actually influence how we taste and perceive a brand or a product. So next time you sit around with a wine that you bought, let's stay in the liquor situation, and it is an expensive wine, and you open the bottle and you taste the wine and you say, yeah, I can really taste the price difference. It might not actually be the wine that is being different, but it's purely knowing that it has a higher price with the inter-attribute correlation that might actually steer your perception and let it taste very well. So, that is good news. So with this, to conclude, you see that there are many aspects that can be included in an advertisement, in a commercial, or on a package of a product that have an impact in whether we think we actually need the product, how we interpret the product, how much value we assign to the product. It steers our expectations of the product. And in the end, it will not only determine whether we buy it, but it can actually also influence how we perceive the product after we bought it and how well we evaluate it. This is just a couple of these elements, and there are many more out there, which makes it a really terrific field for somebody who loves influence and persuasion. Hopefully for you, it will help you to sell lots of products, make millions of euros, and then, of course, really think about me, poor me. And but maybe it also can help you just to resist these advertisements and maybe not buy the watch in the end. Okay. Thank you.